Welcome. I'm your host, Stefano, and this is When Leaders Talk, a podcast about leadership and most importantly, about leaders. Episode 9, we have another great guest, Andrew Priestley. Andrew is a business coach, so he's a colleague of mine, and we will talk a lot about coaching and the importance of coaching. What is coaching and why people might need a coach to be better in what they do or to achieve a goal that they want to achieve. Andrew is also a best-selling author. He wrote 8 books and he published many more, and they all talk about leadership, business, and leadership in business. This conversation will touch upon a lot of topics in leadership, from the definition to leadership to what is important in a leader. We talk about accidental leaders. We talk about leadership during the pandemic and how it changed, and we talk about how to keep this balance between results and relationship as a leader. We talk about strategic leadership and how to develop the vision, how to communicate your vision to your team member. But most importantly, we talk about what is really important in a leader. And when you find a person that inspires you, the person that you respect, the person that motivates you, that you admire, that's the leader you want to be. That's the person that you can call a role model for you. So Andrew will give us a lot of insights and information about leadership, and his point of view is one of an expert. So I'm sure you will learn a lot and you will enjoy this interview as much as I enjoy doing it. Before I leave you to the interview, let me invite you to subscribe and follow me on social media like LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So with no further ado, Andrew Priestley. So welcome, Andrew Priestley. Welcome to When Leaders Talk. It's really a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, likewise. Looking forward to a chat.
Yeah, me too. Actually, we had a earlier conversation a few days ago, and it was just the part was really great for me, and I've learned a lot. And I'm sure today more will be said, and more I will learn. So I'm really looking forward for it.
Yeah, likewise.
Okay, so your perspective is a special one, if you want. It's not just because you're a leader, but also because you're a coach and you teach to leaders, right? You're a mentor, you're a business coach and leadership coach. So your angle on leadership is not just one of the leader who actually practice the leadership, but is also the one who teaches leadership. So there is a lot, I'm sure there is a lot to learn, as I said. So the first question is, what is your definition of leadership, if you have any?
Yeah, I mean, you asked me that to think about that, and it's actually it hasn't really changed. For me, a leader, and just for clarification, there's sorts of leaders that we talk about are political leaders, military, sport, and business, right? I really focus on the last one, business leaders, right? So even though I've coached politicians, I mainly coach business people. So, and then a leadership role. And leaders in that context, my definition is that you're responsible for a strategic outcome or a strategic objective through the use of a team. So you might be achieving strategic outcomes, but you don't have a team. I think that's more about self-leadership.
Right, personal
leadership. If you've got a team, for me, a leader is someone who is responsible and has accepted that they're responsible to achieve a strategic outcome.
So there is, what I see is, as you say, there is a team, there is an objective, can be a vision, or can be, and there is also acceptance of the role, right? So you actually, what does it mean, acceptance of the role?
Well, really interesting thing since COVID, particularly, right? An aspect of my business that has grown is mentoring accidental leaders. And these are people who, for whatever reason, have been elevated into a leadership role, didn't want to be a leader, were very comfortable being on a team but not leading that team. But COVID and work from home and remote working and all that sort of thing has really changed a lot of workplaces. So probably in the last 2 years, I've dealt with two things. Number one, anxiety, right? And the second one is this accidental leader, right?
It's an interesting concept, the one of accidental leader. Never heard before. So I guess, and then you explain well what happened. Basically, you find yourself to managing people and without knowing why. How did you did you get there?
Yeah, well, technically, you've got a competence. You know how it works. Like you've got some competency. You've got some skill. You exhibit the behaviours. You know what the goals of the organisation are, right? But your identity is you don't see yourself as a leader or believe you are a leader. So a lot of my clients say, I'm not a leader, where patently they are, right? But the identity hasn't caught up with the role. So accidental leaders don't actually see themselves as, I'm a boss, I'm a manager, but they wouldn't say I'm a leader, but they are a leader.
You talk about COVID, and of course, it's easy to ask, how did COVID change leadership?
God, you know what? There's better qualified people to answer that, but I think what I've seen is people said COVID was bad. I actually work with a lot of companies where COVID was actually just double the size of their business, right?
Okay.
And particularly coming out of COVID, you've got a lot of pent-up demand, and so a lot of my clients are going through very fast growth at the moment. And so there's capacity issues and HR issues and all that sort of thing. But in the UK, and I know it's true in America as well, we don't have a hiring crisis. We've got a retention crisis, which is there's no shortage of qualified, talented people, but can we get them to stay? And the big thing right now is, can we hang on to people? Can we actually keep people in our organisation? Because right now people are saying, you know what, it's really weird. If you remember at the start of COVID was, you've got to work from home. What work from home? No. Right? And then they got used to the idea. You've got to come back to work now. What? I've got to come back to work? No. So there's a lot of people saying, can I still work from home? And there's a lot of issues, particularly insurance is leading the charge on that one.
Yeah, I think there is a very public story about a leader, Elon Musk, wanting people to go back to work. And I was like, go on, it's time for you to go back to the office. Yeah. And it is pushing on that. That's I think Elon Musk right now is an interesting personality to study from a leadership point of view. Do you have any opinion on him?
On Elon Musk?
Yeah, on his side, on the leadership.
Yeah, he's
side.
Amazing. Yeah, great. Anyone who's listening in, Elon's great. Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's
no, without judging necessarily. Right?
Look. Elon plays at a level that most of us can't even get our heads around. Right.
Right. Yeah.
He really does. Right. It's highly strategic. It doesn't really. From what I've seen, it doesn't really care too much about what happens below that level, at the operational level, but did we achieve what we wanted or not? Well, heads roll, right? He's a tough boss. He's very, very tough, right?
Yeah, it is tough. And I think it's very easy to criticize him.
But a total visionary.
Right, yeah, it is. It's very easy to criticize him. And I think one thing that he has, and he showed that he always had, was a vision. Yeah. So I might not agree with everything he's doing, but at the end of the day, I'm sure he's looking at something and he's aiming for that objective goal, vision, whatever it is, and he's going forward with it.
And it's a really interesting point you say, because people say, we talk about vision, mission, blah, 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 right? And people think vision has to be off the Richter scale, transformational, like Elon Musk's thing. No, it's if you're a leader watching this on the replay, for example, the question is, vision's about direction. Where are we going tomorrow? And it's got to be relevant to what you do. So at one stage there, I was the chair for a children's charity, and when I looked at their vision and their mission, you lost the will to live. It was incomprehensible, right? and it certainly didn't. When I asked people what the vision was, they said it sort of half-heartedly, right? So for me, it's sort of like you understand what I'm saying. Ex-military, right? I was a volunteer firefighter. The mission is put the fire out.
Right.
There's a fire, put the fire out, right? That's it, right? But the vision might be to safeguard our community from bushfires, and it's to make it a safe community. That's what our vision is, so that when a bushfire, which you can't control when it will hit, at least we've got a much better opportunity to contain the damage and loss of life and loss of property. So with the charity, the mission was we were working with vulnerable children aged 4 to 12, and over COVID again, domestic violence was through the roof, right?
Right.
This country as it was worldwide. And for the first time ever, domestic violence focused on children, right? So our vision was to safeguard. Every single day you'll see us safeguarding children, right? That's our mission every single day. When I did a little bit of work with Crisis in the UK, which is a charity for homelessness, every single day you'll see us giving someone a bed tonight and a meal. That's our mission, right? The vision for the children's charity, though, was it's sort of what direction we're going. What are we heading for? And we looked at where our referrals for these vulnerable children came from, because we had a pool of play therapists and child psychologists, and we were getting referrals, and we're getting them from the NHS CAMS, and NHS was getting their referrals from primary schools, right? So it's primary school age. And so to put a fine point on it, a couple of years ago, Grenfell Towers, which most people know was a social housing, maybe 14, 15 stories high, that caught fire, and a lot of people perished, and a lot of kids saw family members perish in that, right? Some of those kids had not even been interviewed 6 to 8 months after that tragedy, right? So we were thinking, how do we speed that up? So you're starting to get an idea of, what are some of our objectives? And then it was ultimately the schools were frustrated with the time it took. So we thought, I wonder if we can connect with them directly and without upsetting NHS. And so we figured that out. And so the objective was to give them resources to contact every primary school in the UK, give them a website with resources. And so our vision emerged, and this is what I'm saying, sometimes as a leader you've got to tease it out. The vision became that we are the go-to charity in the UK for children between the ages of 4 to 12, right, who need safeguarding, and we're the go-to resource for play therapy in the next 12 months.
Right.
Right. It wasn't just we're the go-to charity, but we're the go-to in the next 12 months in play therapy. That was our vision. And we achieved that. We were nominated as Charity of the Year, for example. We didn't win it, but we certainly got nominated, right?
Wow.
Incredibly, the 154 volunteers suddenly realised, that's what we're up to. We're a resource base, and every day we're safeguarding kids, and we're the go-to resource in the UK. They could say it and they could believe it, right?
Yeah, because you understand what you're doing. You understand your long-term goal, or mid-term. It depends how you want to set the vision. And then that's actually what drives motivation, right?
Yeah.
At the end, if your team they don't know where they're going, they don't know what they're doing, they don't feel really motivated. It's like it's just work or anything else.
And it's a really interesting point that you make there about motivation, because, for example, I lecture in Leading Entrepreneurial Teams, and we know that individuals are either incentivized or motivated. So the thing about the charity is I had 154 volunteers. Now, over COVID, they worked longer hours than expected, right? For no pay.
Right.
Right?
You're voluntary.
What was driving it? That's motivated, right? And motivated is intrinsic, because they believed in what we were doing. They could see what we were doing was making a difference, right? incentivize is really what we call about hygiene. How much do I get paid? What are my hours? Is there a dental plan? What time do I start? What time do I finish? Do I get holiday pay? That's the incentivization thing. And on the really interesting on the subject of incentives, right? Question: does money make you happy?
That's actually something I want to ask you. Was like, what does it work better? A good motivation or a good incentives?
Well, start with this. See, incentives is about money, right? Does money make you happy, Stefano? What do you think?
I'm sure that it can contribute to happiness in a way, but it's not the most the important factor.
Well, see, the science is against you, right? Money makes you happy, period.
Oh, okay.
Right?
I'm very idealistic. Well, because I don't know. I've not experienced anything of it.
There's a lot of research on this, right? So in the US, right, and if you want to see the science behind it, Yale University do a course called The Science of Wellbeing, which is a fabulous course, 12-week course, wonderful. But what we know is that around about in America, if you're earning about 75,000 US, you're pretty happy.
Right.
So the question then is, does 150,000 make you twice as happy?
No, I don't think so. Right.
No.
I think that probably once you reach a well-being, it doesn't matter how much you are. What is the amount of money that you can collect? I think the happiness is the same.
Yeah. So what happens
if we want to define happiness like this, but it's
happiness goes up, and when it hits about 75,000, it does that. It plateaus.
Right.
Right. So are rich people happier than I am? Probably not. As long as they're earning about 75 grand or more, we're about the same level of happiness. So what takes over from that? Once you deal with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Once you take over those physiological needs, I can pay my rent, I can put food on the table, I can keep the lights on, all that sort of stuff, right? Then that's sort of like the incentivizing part. But once you hit that, then, and this is why we've got this retention issue since COVID, particularly with millennials as well, is millennials want meaning and they want purpose, right? So a leader has to acknowledge, it's not just about the money. So people are leaving well-paid jobs to go to lesser-paid jobs because there's more meaning and purpose in what they're doing. So the motivation is higher, even though the incentivization is lower, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a thing about leading is if people know here's what our mission is, here's what our vision is, and get away from the textbook things of it. I know what we do every day, and I know where we're going tomorrow, right?
Right.
And I believe in that, and I've got buy-in on that. Then what happens is the motivation, that intrinsic motivation, takes over, right? Incredibly, my father on his 18th birthday, he enlisted in the army, right? For no other reason than he was motivated to defend his country and to look after his country. Patriotism was a real big motivator for them. They thought they were doing the right thing, right? He found out what the reality was, but it didn't kill his motivation. He still felt, and right to the very end, he still felt that his time in the military was very purposeful, right? He felt that he'd achieved something. For humanity's sake, and which again, I believe people in special forces aren't paid that. They're not paid that well.
Right. No.
You get it?
Well, and they might have some extras, but it's not like nothing that makes you rich.
No. So I mean, that's that bit about that motivation incentive piece. It's a really delicate thing right now. I think the intrinsic meaning and purpose is sort of coming to the fore, particularly over the next 7 years. In 2030, millennials will actually outnumber boomers, right? So they'll be running the planet 7 years from now, well and truly, right?
Well, rightfully.
And right now, leaders need to understand, how do they tick? And how do I capitalize on that? How do I make that meaningful to them? Because they are questioning stuff that, that we talk about command and control leadership in an organization. Do what I say when I say blah, blah, blah. And I see this in a lot of workforces when the science doesn't support that. It doesn't really support that.
Don't tell the military that doesn't work.
Well, military though is context, isn't it?
Yeah, it's different, man. Of course, we had a conversation about it. How command and control is based a lot on discipline and obedience, and surely something that is very peculiar to the military world is not. Yeah. It's hard to apply on a business or an organization that is not military-like and so structured, so hierarchical, like the military organization. Yeah. Yeah,
and the goals are a lot more meaningful, a lot more powerful. That you're. I've worked with life and limb industries and sectors, and like I work with critical care hospitals. On a good day, someone gets injured or you have to resuscitate someone and you're successful. On a bad day, they die, right? And so the bases are a lot more sharper. You're playing at a very, very more of the thin end of the wedge there. But when I see companies I talk to people, why don't they just freaking do what they're told, right? And they get frustrated as a leader, right? But see, it comes back to what we started with. Usually their concerns are operational and tactical.
Right.
And the leader is in meddling in the operational stuff, which, if I've got someone in middle management, they should be handling that. But a leader is at the strategic end. This is what we're achieving here, right? So I see, a lot of my leaders in fast growth companies, they're the person who started that company. And they've got a foot in each camp. They're a little bit strategic and a little bit operational, right? So it's how do we get them strategic? That's what my mentoring is. Let's get you going full-time strategic.
How do you teach to go strategic to someone that comes from the tactical operational level?
It's an interesting thing. I mean, like that's what I've done my whole career is how do you get someone to switch, right?
Right.
And firstly, you've got to look at, for me, how do they handle problems? What problems show up and how do you handle them, right? And importantly, not was the problem, but who was I in that problem? What was I doing in that problem? What was I thinking and feeling in that problem? So, that is very much around the self-awareness piece, and it's around that self-leadership piece, right? Who am I being? So I'll give you an example of something I see all day, every day. You're sitting there, there's a knock on your door to your office. Hey, Stefano, can I have a quick chat with you? Yeah, what's that? I've got this problem with blah, blah, blah. And you immediately go, what do I know about that? Okay, I've got to think that one through. I've got to really, really, I've got some ideas on that. I got an opinion on that. Right?
I see you're ready.
I've got an opinion on that, and I know what you should do. In that moment, what's happening is you become the resident expert. You put on your resident expert hat, right?
If you are.
Yeah, you start if you are one. But if you've started the business, you've pretty much seen most of the things. Right. And so I know this, I've seen this before. So you put on your resident expert hat, right? And you give your opinion, you tell someone what to do. The problem with that, well, actually, what do you think the problem with that is? I've just come in, you've given me the answer. What's the problem with that?
Well, the other person doesn't learn. I mean, it's like just they learn to obey, basically. Oh, okay, and they know they can rely to you. So basically, you become a pivot in your organization or company, whatever it is, and it's going to be hard for the team to work without you if you always give opinions and suggestions, right?
Yeah. So you're like me. You're crossing the road and you get hit by a car, right? You're on your back for 13 weeks. What happens to your business?
Right. Yeah. I totally agree. And we see, and going back to the military, we see that a lot in the military because we are very much, you grow up and you think you're the expert, and then most probably whenever you hear about a problem, you think about the solution.
Yeah.
And you give the solution.
Yeah, you give it.
Right.
The problem with that is that you actually create the very problem you're trying to avoid, which is people who won't think for themselves or won't act, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a couple of scenarios in here. At the strategic level, if I've got and I had a company where my production manager came in and said, "Oh, Andrew, what do I do here? Blah, blah, blah. We're on a deadline, right? The clock is ticking. We're coming down to the wire. And this guy's, what do I do?" Right? So there's no way known I'm going to say, well, go off and think about it. I'm going to roll my sleeves up. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to fix it. We're going to get it back on track, right? That's what most leaders will do. And you know what? If you're under that sort of pressure, you should do that.
Yeah. I mean, there are circumstances, of course.
Yeah, you've got it. Yeah. But the follow-up to that was where I said, at the end of it, when we got through it and we achieved our target and we did what we did, I said, can we have a chat? When you've finished and done what you need to do, can we have a chat? Right? So he comes in and I said, "Ken, why was it necessary for me to get involved?" That's strategic. See, now I'm switching my expert hat across to my coaching hat. What did you learn from that situation? Right?
Right.
And he goes, well, da, 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 da. And so in a sense, what I'm finding out is I'm testing the level of just what he knows and doesn't know. But in that situation, I've hit a limit. Right.
Right.
And if he's in a key role, a key operational role, then that needs to be looked at really, really carefully, because that's telling us under pressure, right? Another one was, I have a client who's doing a major reboot of an IT reboot for a company, £80 million, right? Big reboot. And the guy running it goes missing in action. Right? I'm texting my guy because I knew this was coming up, and I'm texting him as a coach. I was more nervous than my client was, right? I'm going, what's happened? Where is he? Blah, 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 blah. We eventually found him, but, where were you? And
he was playing golf.
Or the equivalent, I was I drank too much and so slept, that whatever it was. But see, that's where as a leader that runs interference on, that person's lost credibility. He's lost. The team don't respect him at all. They're not prepared to. They don't admire that behavior. They don't respect that behavior. They don't want to follow that behavior. Now you got a problem.
So do you think leadership actually is something that you prove when you are under stress, under pressure, or you can prove it even in different situations?
Yeah, my feeling, my background's organizational psychology, industrial organizational psychology, and I've worked with life and limb sectors, right? So for me, I sort of, if you think of it as a spectrum, up this end, it's big bases you've got to hit and you can't afford to get them wrong. Up here, it's okay, right? But what I learned was who you are is who you are under pressure, right? Where do you go under pressure? So when I was developing the leadership profile, which is used worldwide, because if I'm coaching someone, and this is a frustration I have with people who do my work in my sector, right? You'll know as a coach, you'll have a great coaching session, right? And the person's putting on their coat and they're walking out the door and you'll say, was there anything else? And I say, yeah, I wanted to talk to you about, and that's what you should have been talking about that whole hour. Right? Oh, we'll do it next time. See, what you should have been talking about was that issue, right? Or you'll get someone who is dancing around. You don't know, what's going on here? So I developed a thing called the leadership profile. As a coach, it gives me a really good snapshot about where that leader is going to go under pressure in regard to results and their relationships, key relationships. Right. Leadership technically is if you look at if you ask the question, can you lead, and you look at the factors that lead into that, it's usually results, the ability to get results, and the ability to build good relationships and, i.e., run a team, right?
Right.
Right. And so we'll know people who get amazing results, kill every relationship.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I have a list of those. Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll know people who get nothing done, but everyone loves them, right? Right. And then there's people who get nothing done and kill every relationship. And then there's that small amount of people who get great results and they build incredible relationships as well. But it usually comes down to they hone that skill under pressure. Right, they usually have that experience. It's a given they've got the qualifications and they've got some prerequisite experience, obviously, right? But they've learned out what's going to move the needle, what's the strategic objective, what are the key results. So I'm a big fan of OKRs, objectives and key results. Okay, but how do we bring our people? How do we get that buy-in, that relationship? Right. So when you're looking at good leadership, you're seeing both of those things. So someone that you and I both talked about a few moments back gets incredible results, but not necessarily builds great relationships. And that's sort of like that if you're looking as an outsider, I'm not an insider in that network, but that's sort of the common feedback I get. Great results, but boy, people get.
Well, but the problem is that sometimes you have organizations that they really look at the results, so they don't mind if you destroy basically, or you do not cultivate the team members. It's all about results. Can be gains, can be more profits or other things. So it is really a question of a matter of the culture, the leadership culture within an organization. How they want to do it. And of course, at the end of the day, if a team doesn't feel really motivated, they will leave. Without a right, yeah, of course. I mean, as soon as they have a better offer, they quit.
Even if they don't have a better offer, good operators. This is what's happening, right? Since COVID, particularly, right? Good operators. So I don't need to put up with this, right? The bad ones go, well, at least I'm getting paid. See, it's the incentive. Okay. So what you end up with the people who you don't really want on the team and the people who are the talent. And that's what talent retention is the problem. Is people who are good at what they do. They're not going to put up with. People aren't leaving bad companies. They're leaving bad bosses.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
We see that globally. Yeah.
Oh, yes, and everywhere. So how do you keep this balance between results and relationship? What are the qualities of a leader, that can actually perform at its best?
Yeah, in a business context, I mean, obviously, it's one of the things that if I ask this question of when I do training of business people, right? What is the goal of business?
Right.
And straight up and down, the goal of business is to make money. Right?
Well, yeah.
Otherwise, you don't have a business, right? So if you're in doubt, if you're in the UK, ring up HMRC and say, hey, what's the goal of business? And I'll say, make money. Why? I say, we can tax you. Right? And if you're successful, you can employ more people, so we can tax them too, right?
Well, yeah.
So you do have this commercial reality to running a business. The business has to be. We know that, and I'll talk about, I don't know what it is where you are, but in the UK, and the ratios are the same. It may be different money, but the ratios are the same. But there's 6.2 million businesses in the UK, right? 70% of those businesses have revenues less than £300,000. Right? The VAT threshold here is £85,000. So of that 70%, 80% of that number earn revenues less than the VAT. So there's an inordinate number of small one-man band businesses, right?
Right.
Up from that, it's between 300,000 and 2 million is 20% of UK businesses.
Okay.
Between 300,000 and 2 million. And they employ between 3 and 20 staff, right? So when does leadership kick in? and leadership's a really interesting thing because you're going to attach it to this financial thing. The government, when they give their annual business performance report in the House of Parliament here, they talk about two things: the number of the revenues and the number of people employed, and that metric is pretty universal. In America, they have the same sort of metric, right?
Yeah.
How much was your revenue? How many people did you employ, right? So somewhere between 3 and 20 is a sweet spot. That's where you've got a lot of taxation. It's the government likes that little sweet spot, all that sort of thing, right? But here's what I see happen again and again. For someone who started a growing business is when you employ 5 or 6, it was true in my case, when there was just 6 of us, right? I could do my own work. So there's the operational side. I'm doing my stuff, right? And I could monitor what the other 5 guys were doing. I had the mental bandwidth for that, right? Put the 7th guy on. And what happens is a bit of an interruption to my day, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I guess.
Because you don't have as much bandwidth, right? You get to 12, right? And 12, so leadership starts to kick in around about that 6th employee. That's where you now start thinking, I need to put a middle manager in here so I can do more. Yeah, and seriously, you've got to sustain that sort of growth as well. So if the goal is to make money, you've got to sustain that. It's got to be profitable and sustainable, right? 12 is pretty good. So there's a lot of things. Put the 13th guy on, right? So, how did that work out for Jesus, right? The 13th guy
was a bad one.
not so good. Not so good. They were okay while there was 12 of them, right? The 13th guy. And then when you get to about 20, when you've got 20 employees, so you've pushed over that threshold of 6 to 12, 12 and above, you're being forced to be more strategic. Right. So if you're then going back to, I want to get back on the tools again, the operational side, right? So it's not so much a practicality thing, but it's also an emotional thing, right? There's another bandwidth where you go from 2 to 8 million, and that's about 4%. And that's the toughest place for anyone running a company. Once you get through 8%, 8 million upwards, which is only about 1% in this country, right? Things change again, emotionally and leadership-wise. You know what? If you had any thoughts I should jump on a computer and help out, no. You don't. I employ you. What do I pay you to do? Right?
Yeah.
It's very strategic going, very different sort of language, right?
Yeah.
So it's that transition piece. So make money is the first thing. But the second thing, because people will go, oh, it's just about money. This guy's all about money. No, that's the commercial reality. But the second thing you ask is, what's the purpose of your business? And that's a very different question to what's the goal of the business. The goal is to make money, but the purpose is to deliver sustainable value to the people who you're serving, right? So it's all about service. So the charity, we're not paying you. So it's got to be very purpose-driven. It's got to be, why do we exist? What are we here for? What's the direction we're going in? Do we have the determination to go in that direction, right, as a leader? So, from a business perspective, where I get involved with a lot of companies is accidental leaders, is where they're put in charge of a group of 20 people, where they've gone from being one of 5 or 6, or they've been one of that 20 to now you're running that 20. It's emotionally and mentally a very different way of thinking about what you do in a leadership role. And accidental leaders usually go kicking and screaming. Can you teach them to lead? Absolutely, totally you can.
And what is true also is that some people are fit for leading smaller companies, and once their company is getting bigger, well, and we've seen this happening many times, especially in big companies, big tech companies, like even with Apple. The good Steve Jobs was kicked out at a certain point because he was considered not fit for being the CEO of Apple as he was big. Then he wasn't reinstated for other reasons. But even Netflix, I read a book about the founder of Netflix. I don't remember his name, Mark something, but basically he had to leave the company early in like 2000 2002, before, way before Netflix became the Netflix that we know. Netflix at the time was just a DVD rental company, right? Because he understood that he was not fit for working and leading a company that was becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. So he left to his partner, and
it's a really tough thing, because there are people I've worked with who are really good startup CEOs.
Right.
Really
exactly.
good.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Steve Jobs was a classic, brilliant startup CEO, right? And notice he went and started another thing and another thing, right? So he was a really good startup, right? But then he became the CEO of running an established company, which is a lot different. So, I've got a guy at the moment I'm working with where ideally he should say the COO of that company and put a CEO in there, or he should go up to a chairman role, but not CEO, right? Because he doesn't have the chops for being the CEO of it, right?
But I guess for, if you think about, sorry for interrupting, but if you think about, he needs a lot of, you need to be humble a lot to do that. You're the founder, you get idea, you think it's your company, and Apple was his company by all definitions, and at the end you feel like put apart, and if you are the COO, it's not the same as the CEO, and so you need to be humble a lot to understand. You need to have a lot of self-awareness and to understand what your happiness and life purpose is, and then you can accept it.
In a sense, you're arguing for. I do a lot of virtues-based mentoring, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you're talking about being humble, you're really talking about selflessness as a virtue, right?
Yeah.
Because your intention is always for whom? It's for the greater good, right?
Yeah.
That's where your mind goes up. Your mind goes up to who are we doing this for, right? Which is what mission and vision, why they're so important, right? Incidentally, we probably don't have time, but principles then underpin that. You have guiding principles that orientate why you make those decisions. So a lot of this is. I was going to make the point with Steve Jobs that what made Steve Jobs a good comeback CEO to Apple was, and this is where you and I, was good coaching.
Right. So remember, you can change. You need a coach.
And you can't do it on your own. You need, right. But if you look at all of those guys, all of them had a coach.
Yeah, but that's the point. I mean, it's and understanding who you are and understanding that you might need external support. And no, I don't want to publicize coaching or anything, but it's an effective way. So
if somebody says, Andrew, convince me why I need a coach, right? My clients, I don't have to convince them for a start off, right? They know that they've made the decision I need a coach. They can see the benefits, right? But if I've got to convince you, that's why you need a coach.
Yeah, and actually, I think that everyone needs a coach at some point in life for something, And because we are not perfect, it's not like with a coach you become perfect. It's far from that.
No.
But you can be better at something.
And that's if you like a false outcome. Be the best version of you. I'm not a big fan of that phrase, right? It's just it's be a more responsible version of you, be a more grown-up version of you. That's where I go to, because I don't know about you, but what you know this, you actually absolutely know what I'm talking about. At one point, when I made a mistake, I had to eyeball all the people who I employed. Right. And it didn't just stop there, right? 15 people, for example, they go home at night and they go, Andrew, what an idiot, over the dinner table to their wife. Can you just shut up about Andrew? And the kids, Dad. See, you're impacting not, that person, their partner, if they've got families. So when you're an idiot at the leadership level, it doesn't just stop with the thing that happened. It goes right through. So I had a client who employed 80 staff, and the guy's an idiot, right? When I went to meet him the first session, he said, why do you think I need a coach? I said, well, and I have membership. I've got a good rapport with him at this point. I said, because you're an idiot. That's why. Right? And he goes, what do you mean?
Is he still a client?
Yeah, this is a client. Yeah, he's still a client. But I said, look, what I want you to do is I want you to get a photo. I want you to ask every employee that you've got to bring a family photo and give it to you. And I want you to blue tack them behind you on the wall. Everybody who think, and every time you're an idiot and want to do something stupid like the stuff you get up to, turn around and look at that wall, and that's how many people you impact.
Well, it's I guess you need to understand when you are being an idiot, right?
Yeah,
and that's not easy, because probably you actually think, oh, yeah, I'm doing good.
Yeah.
I'm reasonable. I'm not an idiot.
Yeah.
But you don't know how impactful. And you're right. Every time you get upset at work, you go home, you get frustrated, and you're upset with your kids, and then your wife or husband or partner or whatever.
Yeah.
Or with your family in general, friends, you don't want to go out, and it impacts a lot. It impacts your will to leave sometimes, in a very harsh way.
Quite a few years ago, when I thought I understood leadership, right? When I first started out, I had all the textbook stuff on leadership. What you do, we had a syllabus that we had to teach, right? And PowerPoints. And so you get a room full of people, and we're going to give you leadership. And when you've done that, you're a leader, right? That was how we did it. And I was out on a mining site, and I had 30 guys, 6'8", big guys, wide guys, big tough miners, but all in key roles on that mining site, right? And the issue that we were talking about was industrial accidents, because there was a lot of industrial accident, health and safety issues, right? And they said, it's a leadership thing. Can we get a leadership guy in to come in and talk about it? So I go in to talk to these guys, and 9 o'clock, the session started. By 9:15, I've lost them. I can see that. They're looking at their watch. They're looking at the clock. Because I'm running a PowerPoint and slides, they've got a kit with ring binders, and I know they're not going to use them, right? And my awareness said, no, this isn't working. And it's really, really hard to pull back from that, because I'll fumble through it type thing. But anyway, I said, guys, take a break at 9:15. So go have a coffee, go have a smoke, go and have a coffee. Right, I'll see you back here at 9:30. Go have a 15-minute break. Got rid of all the PowerPoints, got rid of all the books, got rid of all the ring binders, everything. Got rid of it. I had no idea what I was going to do. But since we're talking about leadership, when they came back in, they were going, where's all the stuff, right? And I asked, I just got one question for you guys. I want you to get into groups and talk this. Who on this site do you respect? Do you admire? Do you follow? Or who on this site don't you respect, you don't admire, or you don't follow? And why, right? Go talk that through. And then you're going to have to come back and present, right? So, and I'll give you half an hour. We get to half an hour. Can we have more time? Yeah, no worries. More time. An hour and a half later, they started to come back and started presenting. The thing that stunned me the most about that was, and they're not overhearing, they're all in different parts of the building, right? Talking this through, was they identified the same guy. All 5 groups identified the same guy, this guy called Frank, right? And so the question was, what is it about Frank? And they all said they respected Frank, they admired Frank, and they would follow Frank. Right? They respect, trust, put that one, that in there. And I said, what has he got, a winning personality? He said, no, you haven't met Frank. Frank is not he certainly doesn't win hearts and minds, the hearts of people. He's a really tough guy, but we respect him, we trust him, we'd follow him. Okay. And it came down to this. Frank knows what's happening on this site. Awareness, right? He knows what's happening. Situational awareness. He knows how he feels about what's happening, and he knows what he wants to do about what's happening. That's all the awareness piece, right? He opens his mouth and he speaks up, right? He asserts himself. Is he ever polite? No. Very rarely polite, but you get it. You get what he's trying to say, right? Right. And I said, what does he do specifically? He said, well, he questions more than he tells. He asks more questions, right? So you and I would recognize that as the managing coach, the manager as a coach. He's coaching them. He's being a resource more than a command and control guy, right?
Yeah, it's all about questions. Yeah.
He brokers very clear agreements. We know what we're supposed to be doing, what we're not supposed to be doing, right? He holds us accountable. Did you say you were going to do this? And he adjusts the game. If it's not working, he goes. And I said, what is it about the adjustment? How does he do that? And he said, well, if it worked, it's all about us, the team. There's that cultural piece. He said, if it failed, he starts with himself always. And now I said, so flip that over. The people you don't admire, what do? Well, firstly, they know squat about what's happening on this mining site. Something could be happening right under their nose and they'll miss it. They don't speak up in a timely fashion, when it's needed. They don't. It's unclear what they want us to do or who's doing what. The accountability goes out the window, becomes actually a culture of blame. And then the adjustment part is, who can I blame? Right? We go looking for whose fault was this, whose blame is it, right? And it's never their fault, right? Now, if that happened once, if it was just the once, I wouldn't have got my attention. But I ran that particular thing. The feedback from the group was that was the best training day we've had, because they're dealing with what's true for them, and they were learning a lot about, oh, shoot, I've got to be a lot more aware. I could do that. I could just speak up more. I could get clearer on agreements. I could hold people more accountable, and I could adjust my game. They walked away with a soft skill set.
Right, because you have a role model. You are able to define a role model for you, and you want to be like that person. So you understand who you are, what are your limits, and say, okay, what am I missing to get there? What are the gaps I need to fill to be that person, or to be me, like the person?
Yeah, and it becomes aspirational in that sense. Yeah, I mean, human being psychology is, here's where I am now, here's where I want to be. Can I cross that terrain and get there, right? How do I get across there? That's why coaches, again, are so important, to help you figure out, where are you right now? Where do you want to be, right? And how are we going to get you there? And, what's our treatment path? What's our coaching path to get you across, to bridge that gap? And it's actually a strategic gap that you've got to cross.
Absolutely. And I'm going to play this interview for advertising coaching in general. So we don't have much time left. I think, you say so many things. We could keep talking forever. But I have a question for you, because you say, that basically the thing you asked was, who do you admire, who inspires you, and who do you respect? So who is your role model, actually? Is there any person you admire, respect, and that inspires you?
Yeah, I do. There's people, they're not well known. They're not well known, but they have a great game, right? For the reasons I've just said, that they know what's happening. There's a mentor of mine who, the goal of business is to make money, and it's to deliver on purpose, right? So I was mentored to understand the numbers, get that part, understand how do management accounts work, right? So I really understand it. I run a workshop on how money flows through a business, which is just a management accounts 101. And it stuns me the amount of people who do not understand just how important management accounts are to a business, understanding that part, right? But he knew that stuff. It's as a coach, and this is what a frustration I have with a lot of coaches, is they don't be the coach. And a coach has got to say, you know what, you're an idiot, or no, this isn't working. You've got to call it real time, like you would in basketball. Think about it. A coach works on what they can observe. A mentor is dealing with beliefs and values, right? But a coach is looking at what I can see you doing, and how can we improve that? So that's what most coaches coaching comes from, that sports arena, right? This guy got incredibly clear agreements and it drove accountability like you wouldn't believe, and adjusted himself and people. I saw that repeatedly. So there's a guy called Bill Campbell who I really admire, who's not very well known, but for example, Bill Campbell was Steve Jobs' coach. All right. Well, that's a good reason to admire him. Yeah, and he was also the coach of the guys that ran Google as well. So he coached them as well, and the guys at Intuit. Same guy, right?
Oh,
And
wow. Okay.
so him, my mentor was a guy called Jeff who it was a small business, but it was a $2 million turnover 5-star restaurant. And pretty much a lot of what I learned about building teams and culture and running something that was financially successful, but the team culture was visceral. People were applying to come and work there, right? But this guy was very quiet, very down to earth. If he said something, he gave you a lot of bandwidth if you made a mistake to go back and fix it yourself without telling you how to fix it. So your learning curve was really steep, but you embraced that challenge to learn stuff. Those are the people that I admire.
Okay, thank you for sharing this. And we have time for the last question. That is, what if an aspiring leader come to you and say, Andrew, I want to be the best leader I can, my best self, not just leader, the best leader I can.
The best version of me.
The best version of me.
Yeah.
What is the recommendation you would give to this person?
For me, my tool in trade, and my background is psych, right? My background is awareness. It's self-awareness, and it's otherwise all the other virtues you're talking about don't come out of it if you lack self-awareness. So you've got to have the courage sometime to look at something and go, this isn't working, or understand there are two types of clients that you and I both deal with. There's those who need a lot of help, and there's those that need distinction. So my clients are the latter. It's not they don't need help. They earn more money than I earn. They live in nicer houses. They got better cars. They got better compensation packages. But if they were so clever, why am I coaching them, right? And so these people are just looking for a distinction. That requires tuning up their self-awareness, right? When I work with civil aviation, air traffic controllers, right? I'm looking at the radar, and there's a A338 coming this way, and there's a Bell 47 coming this way, right? Beep, 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 beep. I think I'll go for a coffee. No. No. Right? Your awareness says something's wrong with this. And you and I, we could go in another time, but I talked to you about a military guy who, he was on patrol. He's taken a thing. He called stop. There was nothing to suggest that there was anything wrong, but his awareness said this doesn't feel right. So the situation looks okay, but his feeling, his self awareness was this doesn't feel right, right? And response awareness was pull back, and it was the absence of chickens.
Yeah. Actually, self-awareness is the quality will allow you to use better your guts, as part of your brain, because you got neurons all around the body, and the guts is part of it. So
I often say to people, it's not, awareness isn't your problem. For most of my clients, awareness isn't your problem. Ignoring your awareness is your problem.
Right, self-acceptance, I will add, right?
Yeah.
And accepting who you are. As you say,
I'm the worst version of myself. I can accept that at least, right? That's fine, right? And I'd say it's okay to be the worst version of yourself, as long as you know what the worst version of yourself actually is.
Right, it's still self-awareness.
Exactly, yeah.
And probably if you know what is the worst part of yourself, also the best part of yourself. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. Well. Human. We're better safe than sorry creatures, right? The brain is wired for better safe than sorry, right?
Right.
And it's a lot easier for us to critique or criticize something and find fault with something than it is to find something. It actually, to find something good and positive requires more brain resources, more neurons. You've got to allocate more resources to that, right? So it's a lot easier. Fear is a lot easier than being inspired. Right, it takes more effort to be inspired. So all I'm saying is work with that. That's why we say, where are you right now? Let's face that. What are your fears? What are your anxieties? What are your concerns? How is it right now? That's why a SWOT analysis is really good, right? But where do you want to go with that?
Yeah, as you say, there is a different part of the brain that you need to train every day. Yeah. It's really your gym, your exercising.
Yeah. And a coach will help you do that.
Right. So, Andrew, thank you very much for all the advertising for coaching, your wisdom and insights on leadership. It's been amazing talking to you. And I guess, as I say, we could keep talking for a few more hours, but 1 hour is enough for this episode. And maybe we can have another round another day.
And thank you for what you're doing, right? It's not lost on me that when you go out and reach out to people to talk about leadership, it's the fact that you're doing it is amazing. The fact that you're making this available to people is even more amazing. So I want to say thanks.
You're welcome.